Welcome to the February 2024 forecast for all signs. So this is based on either your rising, moon, or sun sign, ideally in that order. So if you know your rising sign, then focus on that one first. If you know your moon sign, you can add that one. And then finally, you could add your sun sign. You could also use any other sign, as a matter of fact, in terms of from whatever perspective, because every sign, of course, is in a house from a certain other house from a different vantage point. You'll always get some insight into something based on a certain sign. But again, focus on your rising sign to begin with, and then you can work it from there. And you can refer to the general forecast. I made a separate video of that. I'm not going to go into the general transits here. I'm going to focus more so on how they affect each sign. So each sign, of course, has a specific experience based on what these planets rule by house position. So let's get into it, and let's start with the sign Aries. So for Aries rising and or moon sign, Aries, your ruling planet Mars, is about to finish up in Sagittarius, which is your ninth house sign, and it has been in exchange with Jupiter in your sign. So this Jupiter-Mars exchange between your first and ninth house, between your sense of self and what you believe to be true and what you believe to be possible and doable, has been, I imagine, a great one for you. I think the beginning of this year in January and leading into February has been a good start for Aries for sure. Doesn't mean there haven't been complications. There absolutely have, especially the beginning of January, but things feel a bit more inspired, I would imagine, for you. And you might feel this sense of just being fired up from the beginning of the year into February. But what happens now is that, and by the way, brief pause, that's not a bad thing. There is no but here. There's a great conclusion to all of this in many ways, is that from the 5th of February, Mars, your ruler, moves into exaltation. It's most dignified sign in Capricorn, your 10th whole sign, while Saturn continues to move through your 11th whole sign, Aquarius, again in a very dignified position, not only by sign, but also house placement, as Jupiter continues to transit through your sign. So basically, you've got a lot of dignity going on, Aries, in February. You've got a lot of action and energy that can be really followed through with. So, in a sense, really all of the inspired ideas that you've had from the beginning of the year can now be implemented in February. It's almost like a breaking through any kind of limitations and blocks that you might have and doing something. Now, the blocks themselves, of course, come when Mars and Pluto, your ruler Mars and Pluto, conjoin by Valentine's Day, by the 14th. Venus will have also moved into Capricorn, and of course the month of February starts with Mercury moving into Capricorn. So all the planets are gathering in Capricorn, and the sun will be there for the first couple of weeks as well. So a lot of emphasis, Aries, on your 10th whole sign. And with Mars here especially, despite again the blocks that might come up with Pluto, kind of the hidden blocks that you might have, the things that trip you up or you tripping yourself up, this is a very powerful time for you to overcome those, push through and overcome any limitations and get going and do something. And even if it's not quite clear from the get-go what you're going to gain from doing that, because Saturn continues through your 11th sign and it might not be clear about what you're gaining, whether financially or any other way, it still is a very profound time for you, Aries, to really use the energy of Mars and focus and do it and just do it, as the slogan goes. Together with Mars's aspect now onto Jupiter, and that comes to perfection more towards the end of February. This is a sort of very optimistic, sort of forceful, yes, but very fortunate result here that can come from this. So you take action and you push through some block and you do something and you feel more energized by that, by doing it. And it's kind of like getting that dopamine hit and you do more and you want to do more and then it works out and then you want to do more. It just kind of evolves in that way. So I think this is a very positive time. I think it is also in many ways also going to challenge you to do all of these things. So it's very easy for me to sit here and say all of that. But when Mars is exalted in Capricorn, Saturn sign, it does challenge you to actually follow through. You cannot just keep the idea going in your head. You have to actually land it on, you have to really go with it and implement it and be very practical. And as the sun now, your fifth lord, which is very much about creative self-expression and planning your future, is moving through your 11th house sign, which is also about the future, but is more broad in its scope. It's more about thinking about how your wishes impact your society even, but certainly at least groups of people and associations of any kind that you're involved with, and certainly your friend circle, all of that. Sun in your 11th sign. And of course, it also means in terms of your own earnings. So I guess the issue here is just to be mindful of the Sun-Saturn dynamic, just as with all the other planets, including Mars in Capricorn. The dynamic here is that Saturn is ruling everything, and Saturn's aspect to your sign as it continues through your 11th sign is really calling the shots and is sort of like has the last say. And again, in a way, even though Mars is exalted, it benefits from being in your 10th house sign in Capricorn because the energy here is more focused. It's not all over the place, and it isn't a big idea that doesn't really land anywhere, like in Sagittarius necessarily. This is Capricorn; it has to land, and for it to land, you have to get focused. And I wouldn't say blinkered, but certainly focused and apply your energy to something. But with the sun, on the other hand, where your creative energy might be at a sort of a testing point, and especially by the end of the month on the 28th, and that's when they come together by exact degree, where Mercury will join them also, again by exact degree. This could be a time where you just feel, you know, tested. And I think, tested in your convictions, in your ability to carry through something, and just do it. In this case, you might feel like just doing it, but there might be some other things to consider, other issues in your work, for example, or in again what you're getting out of it, and maybe it not being very apparent from the outset. So this 28th of February and leading up to this period is something to be mindful of for sure, so that you stay on track and that you don't underestimate yourself, I would say, but don't obviously overestimate yourself either. There's a real balancing act that has to occur in February. But otherwise, I mean, I think this is a great time of strength and motivation and courage and focus and discipline. Discipline is probably one of the more apt words for February for you, Aries. One last thing to say about the nodes is that they've now really settled into your 12th and 6th houses. So North Node, Rahu, and Neptune in your 12th, Ketu in your 6th. Ketu in the 6th is very much about overcoming some issues in your life and really bringing all of those big, career objective and big ideas and ambitions down to earth in a very practical way and implementing the day-to-day steps that are required. So Ketu in Virgo is asking you now as it moves into Hasta lunar mansion in the middle of Virgo to get very organized with that and to be able to manifest something. You have to get really hyper focused with Ketu in a way, but you also have to bring in some other dimension that your work, your daily work has to have some meaning and depth to it. At the same time, you don't want to avoid any of that and overly focus on the North Node, Rahu, and Neptune in your 12th sign in wanting to kind of just lose yourself in something. Now, the best expression of this would probably be losing yourself in your work in a way. But if you cannot lose yourself in your work and it doesn't feel like it's going with the flow as you're pushing through some, very personal blocks here and limitations and overcoming these and finding your strength and courage, um, there's a balance here, obviously, also. And that balance might be just to get the right amount done so that you can get into that flow state without overdoing it. But make sure that you get the right amount done and not leave anything that needs to be done in another way. Because Rahu and Neptune in the 12 could certainly show this kind of, wanting to kind of just take a break away, wanting to go away and not wanting to deal with things. That's the other side of the coin. And depending on how you're predisposed to Rahu and Ketu, depending on your unique chart, will depend on how you experience all of this, of course. But I would say just generally, the transits of February are powerful for you. Just alone, Mars exalted is very powerful for you. I mean, I don't think that you could understate that. But at the same time, there are some challenges here. And if you're willing to rise to the challenge, this is going to be a very empowering time for you, Aries. So make the most of it. And I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Taurus rising and or moon sign, Taurus, your ruler Venus is moving through your 8th house sign from the first few days of the month of February before it moves into Capricorn by the second week, and then joins all the other planets that are filing into Capricorn. First, it's Mercury on the 1st, then we have Mars on the 5th, and then later on we have Venus. And so by the time Venus makes it in, this will be on the 11th or so, depending on where you are. This means a lot of focus is on your 9th house sign. And with Saturn ruling this in your 10th house sign and aspecting these planets, Jupiter and Uranus in your 12th, there's a lot of emphasis on these signs, including the 11th. So 10th, so 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Starting with the 9th, it's really important in February, and especially from mid-month, to get really clear, like crystal clear about why you're doing what you're doing. Because Capricorn, although it's about just doing it, and especially with Mars transiting through Capricorn, just getting on with it and just do it, as the slogan goes, Capricorn is much more about meaning and purpose. And because Saturn, which rules this, is in the 10th house sign of action and work, it really is about finding that clarity of purpose now so that you can continue doing what you're doing. Or if it's not meaningful or it's not purposeful enough or it's not for you, it's not meant for you, it isn't your purpose in life, then it might be about dropping a lot of these things because, of course, all of these planets are in 12th sign from Saturn in the 10th. So for you to continue to do anything, whether it's work specifically or it's anything that you do, essentially, the 10th house requires you to, with Saturn very powerfully placed here, continue to do that. And again, if it's not meant for you, to drop that so that you continue to do what you need to do. So really powerful transits for you in the month of February, Taurus. Venus being involved in all of these conjunctions, though, in Capricorn in your 9th house, but more especially conjoined Pluto. First is Mars conjoined Pluto. Mercury goes in first and then it conjoins Pluto the first week. But then Mars by the mid-month. And then later on we have Venus. And then Venus and Mars, your ruler and Mars, all together in the 9th house. Pluto really kind of brings up hidden aspects that you might not be familiar with. And it might challenge you to look at things. And for you and other people together in a relationship, more especially, to look at things. Now, if you're traveling, which this could indeed highlight, or you're studying, or you're just having some sort of experience where it's like you're having some really lovely cultural experience, you're just opening your mind, you're expanding your horizons in some way. That's the 9th house. If it's involving other people, as it likely will, because your 7th lord is there, your 5th lord is there, 2nd lord, maybe even family, children, all of these people. Just make sure that you are not triggered in any environment. And if you are, that, to understand and maybe sit with what happened there and why that happened, especially around mid-month, because this Mars-Pluto exact conjunction on Valentine's Day with your 7th lord of relationships conjunct Pluto, that is quite tricky. And I would say, for Valentine's Day to be really mindful of any kind of power struggles that you're having in a relationship and to just to be mindful. And it's not like you have to mind your P's and Q's or anything like that, but certainly just be mindful of what's happening and then relate to that, whatever that happens, if anything indeed does happen afterwards. The sun by mid-month always goes into Aquarius, your 10th house sign, so it's most prominent in the sense of this time of year and your career objectives and goals and all of that, and your direction in life in terms of professionally anyway, is very much highlighted here. Now, your home life is also highlighted because it's the 4th lord and it's moving in through your 10th house and it's conjoining Saturn, the lord of your 10th sign. And by the 28th, they are exactly conjoined with Mercury also joining. So this means that there's a lot of emphasis and maybe a lot of focus and maybe rigid focus as well. And it might feel a bit stifling in a way on your work and work-life balance and home life, and how to get this balance right, and how it might be lost for a time here where you're so focused on work and doing things, and maybe you've been traveling and now you're working, and now there's no downtime here. In a way, there's a lot going on. It's all like great in many ways as well. There's a lot of strength here to access, to enjoy, but is again to be mindful of any kind of relational issues, any triggers or anything that could come up. Don't forget, I mentioned the Mars-Venus, which is a few days before the Sun-Saturn conjunction, and that occurs on the exact, well, they kind of ride alongside each other for most of the month, but the exact is the 22nd of February. And so that the Venus Mars is always a bit of a tricky one for you because it's your Lord and your seventh Lord, as well as your sixth and 12th Lord, all combined in your ninth house. You know, again, if you're traveling with a partner, if you're discussing anything meaningful with people in general, that there could be triggers here for maybe you or the other person. And maybe something you say, no, not meaning to, but maybe that having a big impact on the other person. Jupiter is still in your 12th sign, but this time it's also being aspected by Mars. The exact aspect is later on in the month by the 27th, the exact. And this is where, again, another trigger could come in, but this might be a bit more positive in a way because, again, Mars and Jupiter tend to have a kind of better relationship and it leads to more fortunate results usually. But this could be a bit tense as well, especially for Jupiterian things. So be mindful of friendships at this stage with Jupiter ruling that for you in the 12th house, triggered by Mars in your ninth house with Venus and Mars still together and Pluto and all of that. It's a bit complicated in terms of social life in February for sure despite the strengths that are there and the need to actually still travel and socialize and do different things and be active and work being busy and all of that. But it's so busy and it's so activating and triggering potentially that you have to just maybe slow down and pay attention to what's going on, is what I would say. The last thing I would say, just to finish off the month, there are 29 days of the month. We have a leap year, is that I want to talk about North Node and South Node, Rahu and Ketu, as they've settled into their groove now in your 11th and 5th house. So the emphasis more so usually on the 11th Rahu. And so that will be more about your ambitions, your friends, your social life, and wanting to enjoy yourself, but also ambitions in terms of wanting to gain things in life versus the potential for changes that are happening with your children or your children's relationship with you or your creative expression, your planning, your future and how and what you want to make happen. And more especially now with Ketu moving into Hasta in the middle of Virgo, Hasta, the hand, is a very dexterous and very skillful lunar mansion where Ketu can get really down to it and focus on the details and get on with it. The thing is, Ketu can sometimes be a bit despondent in a way when it doesn't live up to its expectations because nothing worldly can anyway. And so you might find here that if you're, for example, a Taurian who is artistic, maybe your art expression is not meeting your standards or your expectations, and that you might want to deepen your relationship to your art practice and do something different. I don't know. Maybe again, it's your children, maybe it's your plans, maybe whatever. It's something self-expressive anyway, and it's something that needs to come out in another way. Because if it doesn't come out, and you hide it and you bury it deep, that's Ketu, you might become self-critical. And it would be better actually to be kind of outwardly and more objectively so about, for example, your children or your artwork or your plans, whatever, than just getting really inner, very critical, like an inner critic being developed here in a strong way with Ketu. And while that's happening, of course, and why you might not want to look at that, you might be overly focusing on friends and social circles and socializing and going about doing all those things and not to think about all these other things that might be pressing for your attention as well. So again, it's just about getting a balance right between the two. And essentially, like for anyone now who has Taurus rising moon or any potential planets here, then obviously getting a balance right between friends and children, social life and more personal and enjoyable endeavors, maybe even romantic endeavors versus, social life with friends and bigger groups and all of that. So again, just a balance that is required, that is always the case, that will be for the rest of the year into next year, especially with the nodes moving through these signs. So Taurus, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Gemini rising and or moon sign for February 2024. So Gemini, Mercury, your ruler, is moving into Capricorn on the 1st of February into your 8th house sign. It will conjoin Pluto with all the other planets moving in after and then conjoining Pluto. The exact conjunction of Mercury Pluto is on the 5th as Mars is about to move in as well. And so this certainly creates some complex dynamics in many ways, but in another way, Mars out of your 7th house sign might be more beneficial because Mars in your 7th house sign, though exchanging with Jupiter all the while in January in your 11th sign was a very positive one. Mars in the seventh house sign can sometimes be irksome in terms of relationships. It could break up relationships temporarily. It could cause splits. Mars is not the best planet in the seventh house. But in the eighth house, there's something else to be mindful of. And maybe just in terms of your intimacy with your partner or others, thinking about bigger themes as well in terms of eighth house, like unexpected changes that are happening in the world around you that are kind of coming into your awareness more and more in February, because there's a lot going on in your eighth house in February with Mercury, your ruler, Mars, and then Venus moving in, and them all conjoining Pluto. So the exact conjunction of Mars and Pluto is on the 14th, but on the 12th, 11th of February, Venus moves in, and then on the 13th, 14th, Mars and Pluto conjoin exactly. So this is complicated for sure because there's triggers here, and because the eighth house is hidden in any kind of interaction with other people, I would say be very mindful, and even just in social interactions as well and work stuff as well, because Mars does rule your sixth house. It is aspecting your 11th house, where your 10th house lord Jupiter is placed in Aries. There's a strong aspect between Mars and now in Jupiter. So just think about your friends, your group, whatever associations you're involved with, especially, and also if it were professional, where there could be triggers there, and just manage them, I would say, without, becoming fearful about these energies, because they are strong energies. Like Mars is really powerful, and Saturn continues to be really powerful. And all of these conjunctions and aspects and everything kind of are starting to bottleneck in a way in February and starting to cluster, and it could easily just kind of become this kind of, yeah, kind of tight squeeze. So you just need to be mindful of being a bit freer, being a bit looser around your plans, around how things are going to pan out, because you really don't know how they're going to pan out with the eighth house. It's always unexpected. And when you add Mars aspect onto Jupiter and Uranus in your 11th house, really it's very unexpected. And I would say, expect something good. Don't just expect that there's problems. Expect that there could be something really good here. The fact that Mars rules your sixth house and is in your eighth house is like a double negative. So it actually creates a positive. So where there might be some health challenge that has come up, or some challenge in general, there could be overcoming that challenge with this Mars transit now in exaltation. It again could be a bit scary because you're having to deal with something, but again, it's a double negative yoga, a combination where a planet rules a challenging house and is in another challenging house. So it kind of flips everything and you just come out on top. It's like if you weren't given the challenge, it's almost like, you're challenged and then your body, your immune system kicks in and it is challenged. But by being challenged, it kicks in even further, and then it overcomes the situation, like the health crisis, whatever. So that's an example, but it could be any kind of conflict you're dealing with at work as well. It could be any kind of personal issue, any kind of personal thing that you're grappling with yourself inwardly that you're not maybe even expressing outwardly. But there's something here you're going to be able to deal with for sure. Again, just around the 14th, to be mindful of any kind of triggers, because the Mars-Pluto exact conjunction in your eighth house is one, with Mercury embroiled in that, of course, as well, the whole time. And Venus then coming up and meeting with it on the 22nd. So here's the Venus and Pluto or the 17th. Then on the 22nd, you have Mars and Venus come together. And at that stage, your ruler by the 20th has moved into Aquarius. So Mercury's moving into Aquarius with the sun. And this is interesting because we're having all of these planets, Mercury, Sun, Saturn, as Mars and Venus have conjoined by the 22nd. And then a week later, on the 28th, we have Saturn, Sun, and your ruler, Mercury. So this is quite tense, I would say, but it's not tense in a bad way necessarily. It's just it's focusing your attention, maybe. And so maybe attention is better word than tension. Attention. So focus attention, all of your energy on the ninth house, which is very much about thinking in a bigger, higher minded way, thinking more philosophically, thinking in a sense about what the long-term picture is and goal here is. What is it I need to actually start thinking about now in my life to actually implement what I want to do? This is very much the beginnings of that, as planets then really focus on your 10th house, including Mercury later on, and the Sun later on in March, and Saturn even later on next year. So it's kind of like this is a time to really start to think about what do you find meaningful and purposeful in your life, and subsequently the stages and the steps that are required in seeing that through. Because now that Saturn's in your ninth house, it aspects the 11th house, so it focuses on your goals in life. And so it's going to ask you to actually ask yourself, what are your goals? What are your long-term ambitions? And with Mars also aspecting Jupiter now by square house aspect, this is like, a lot of focus now from Mars and Saturn onto Jupiter in your 11th house, your 10th and 7th Lord. It's going to get you to ask bigger questions like, who are you with and why are you with them? And what are you doing and why are you doing it? And is it going to last for the long term? And do you see yourself doing this job in the long term? And do you see yourself with this person in the long term? These kinds of big questions are probably going to crop up in February. And just let them, because they're important to ask. But you don't have to act on any of them, certainly, but you can certainly just focus on these things. So there are a lot of powerful transits in the month of February, absolutely. And, Mercury is moving through your ninth house sign. And so it gives your life more of a sense of clarity and direction after the eighth sign might have stirred things up and shaken up and changed many things. So that's the month of February, Gemini. I hope that's been of help. I just want to leave it on one last point about the nodes. I've been doing this for the other signs. So let's focus on Rahu and Ketu in the 10th and 4th house, the north and south node. Ketu now is kind of really getting into its groove in Virgo and in the Hasta lunar mansion in the middle of Virgo, which is very dexterous, skillful lunar mansion. It's Hasta meaning the hand. So it's very much about making things happen. With Ketu ruling your 6th house, of course, it's about the steps that you need to implement to make things happen. And this would suggest something happening in the home or not happening, as the case may be. So you might not be doing the thing that you need to do, maybe the clear out, the spring clear out that maybe needs to happen right now. And so to make sure that you don't neglect the things that need to be done at home because of maybe work life becoming busier right now, or changes that are happening in work life because of the North Node, Rahu. So Rahu moving through your 10th house with Jupiter again, aspected by Mars and Saturn in your 11th. It's really getting you to focus on the bigger picture here and your bigger goals and work and so on. And all of those big themes, again, it's just a lot of emphasis on them and making sure that you don't neglect the sort of home life and your sense of, just having some alone time and enjoying yourself at home and not always being out and about and doing all the time. This is an absolute need here. This balance is needed for sure to keep everything in check. So that is the month of February, Gemini. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Cancer rising and or moon sign for February 2024. So Cancer, there are a lot of planets gathering in your 7th house sign. The sign opposite your rising sign means it's all about the other. It's all about how you engage with others. It's a lot about, obviously, the most significant other, i.e. your partner or partners. It could be romantic partners, it could be business partners. And certainly with Mars, especially moving into your 7th house sign, exalted and aspecting your 10th house sign, yes, this could be a great time for business and to push through some deal and to do some work. However, on the other side of it, this could be more challenging in terms of your personal relationships, because Mars, when it's so strong in the 7th house, in a house that it really kind of, it doesn't feel comfortable in, because Mars is about willfulness and selfishness in a way. And of course, you're Cancerian and you're not, but Mars is Mars and we all have Mars. And when it's in your 7th house, you might find that, you're dealing with some sort of selfishness. Now, it might not be yours specifically, it might be somebody at work and they irk you in some way, or it might be your children that they're being selfish, or they're being, aggressive, or they're being whatever. Even just boisterous. Like Mars is a youthful sort of energy that is quite hard to maintain and contain usually. Now, the good news here, I guess, is that it's exalted, and I'll show you here actually as it moves in. It's on the 5th of February that it moves into Capricorn. So in a way, Mars is exalted because it's contained, and that's a good thing. So in other words, example would be if you have children, that you're able to kind of direct them and they may be able to focus their energy a bit more. But still, it's Mars. And again, I would highlight and, I'd really tell you just to be mindful of, your relationships at this time, because they could really feel this energy and you could be feeling it from them, because it isn't just Mars. As you'll see, that Mars and Pluto by the middle of the month are exactly conjunct. So the whole thing is about Mars and Pluto. Venus is getting in on the act. Mercury has moved in from the first of the month. All the planets gathered in your seventh whole sign conjoin Pluto. And, even just by, Valentine's Day on the 14th, Mars and Pluto are exactly conjoined. And then afterwards, we have Venus and Pluto, and then Mars and Venus, all conjoining one after the other for the last 2 weeks of the month of February. Yeah, I do think that there could be quite a lot of triggers here. And, even if it were not personal relationships, it could be, like I said, professional and business partners and business relations, business in general. And again, Mars's aspect onto your 10th house sign, where Jupiter and Uranus are by mid-month. This could be, building up into something that could, be good in a way, because it's again about pushing past your blocks and overcoming your challenges and, you know, any difficulties that you might be dealing with in that regard. So that could be better used in that way, I would say, professionally. In, again, your personal relationships, just be mindful. The sun moves into Aquarius, your eighth house sign, after first couple of weeks of the month in your seventh, highlighting again relationships. Eighth sign is different, and now that it's conjoined Saturn, which rules all of these planets through your seventh and eighth, is coming to this end of the month conjunction, an exact conjunction on the 28th. This is complex also because every year this happens, and it happens every year, so it's not unusual. The sun conjoins Saturn. This year, we also have Mercury, and they're all at the same degree, 15 degrees, Sun, Saturn, Mercury. This is your eighth house sign, and this could show some issues here in terms of money issues, family dynamics, something that's been said or maybe not being said, and, maybe having to hold back something. And especially when you combine this with the Mars in the seventh house and its aspect on your 10th, maybe doing something with your partner or in a business or other way, in a personal way, and, having to hold back now. Having to really hold back by the end of the month after something's maybe been done, something happens, and, you kind of maybe feel a bit unsure about yourself now about what you meant to say. That's because the sun rules your second sign, and it's with Saturn in your eighth sign. And I think, again, financially, there might be some issues to grapple with here. And, just might be feeling some tension around these issues. And with Mercury thrown into the mix, again, it might feel like I don't know if I should say that thing. So a very complicated period in that sense. But in another way, like I said, this is a great time to use the strength of Mars and the strength of Saturn to push through something, to overcome your limitations, to focus your energy and to do it. Mars and Saturn both are aspecting your 10th sign. So in a way, there's a lot of energy here to do something. With Jupiter and Uranus continuing to come together now, they will come together by April, but that's building and building through February, March, and April. And yeah, just stay open, be open-minded about what you're doing as well. This could, be a very unexpected turn of events that happen later on as they conjoin in April, which is also an eclipse. And yeah, I would say stay open, stay positive for unexpected positive news as well in terms of your work and what you're doing. And how all of this is impacting you right now, I would say just kind of like setting the stage for this. The last thing I want to say about your chart are the nodes, Rahu and Ketu, the north and south node in Pisces and Virgo, your ninth and third sign. And this is very much about, well, being clear about what you believe to be true and how you can express that anyway. So when you combine this with the Mercury, Saturn, Sun, and, maybe holding back, saying something, this is more probably a month to be more clear about things by doing so, by just taking a moment, taking a step back and thinking about things, and maybe understanding how you feel about things as well as how you think about things, and what you think is true and whether or not it's true, and actually question whether or not your thought about something is true before you jump straight into it. And I guess sometimes the most obvious way to find out if something is true is just to do it. And this is definitely a month of just do it for sure. But sometimes when you just do something, then you realize actually maybe that wasn't right. And maybe then I need to take a step back. So that's maybe what the month of February might hold for you, Cancer. So just be mindful in your relationships and be mindful for yourself as well. And there are a lot of strong energies here. You just need to be able to kind of deal with them, balance them with, other people's considerations and some interesting dynamics that might be going on in your family and relations. As well as, of course, like I said, your work, which I think could benefit maybe more than any other area of your life in February. Okay, Cancer, that is the month of February 2024. I wish you all the best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Leo rising and or moon sign for February 2024. So Leo, the month of February is building into what I think can be a very challenging time, but will be also a very productive time, I think, for you. And in a way, you have to think about it like that, that without being challenged, that you're not going to improve yourself. You're not going to improve your life. So there's some challenge to overcome here, but there's also improvement and a lot of improvements to be made. And there's a lot of strength in February for you to tap into, including Mars moving into exaltation, into your sixth whole sign. That occurs by the 5th of February. And Saturn, as it continues through your seventh house sign, is also still very powerful. But all of these planets filing into Capricorn and then eventually into Aquarius, where the Sun by the end of February conjoins Saturn by exact degree, as well as Mercury, all by exact degree in your seventh house sign. Again, that could be a challenge. But again, without the challenge, that you're not going to make the changes that are necessary otherwise. And I think this points to changes that you're actually now willing to make in February, and or maybe that you feel like you have to make, but that you're actually going to make, and it's going to improve your life. So again, Mars is moving into Capricorn, your sixth house sign, and it's conjoining Mercury, which moves in on the 1st of February. Your Sun has been in Capricorn, your sixth sign, for the last 2 weeks of January, and will be there for the first 2 weeks of February. A lot going on in your sixth house sign, and the fact that, and Venus as well will come in as well in a few days into the month, in the second week of the month. So I'll just show you that here as well by the 11th. So this is, in a way, just putting a lot of emphasis on problems and problem solving and overcoming issues and day-to-day tasks and health routines and work, and all of these things can feel like it's all a bit too much and you're getting bogged down in it. And when you combine the fact that Mars is by the 14th, which is Valentine's Day, exactly conjoined Pluto. So Mercury first conjoins Pluto as it moves in the first week. And then by midweek or mid-month, we have Mars conjoin Pluto. And then soon after, we have Venus conjoin Pluto. And then Venus conjoin Mars. So it's just one trigger after another here. And with the Sun then by mid-month moving into your seventh sign, where Saturn is, which rules all of these planets, 12th from there, there's a lot of triggers here that have to be addressed for you, Leo, in your relationships. Now, if you are dealing with people like co-workers or employees, or just dealing with other people in some way, this is something to be mindful of in February. In your personal relationships also. And although professionally and personally, this could be a great time, and the challenge itself, like I said, improves you, and you rise to the challenge because there's so much strength here. Again, this could be that you're rubbing people up the wrong way, that you're being triggered by people, or they, or you're triggering them. That could also be another point. But this is something to be mindful of, because Mars Pluto especially is a major trigger in your sixth house. And if you use it wisely and focus the energy and do something with this, because it's an aspect to your ninth whole sign where Jupiter is continuing to transit with Uranus. Again, use it wisely, I would say, and focus your energy, and try not to get too involved in dramas that could easily, take all of your energy and attention. Now, by the end of the month, a lot of your energy is taken into dramas, and relationship dramas will be likely one of them by the end of February. That's because the Sun, your ruler, is in your seventh sign, Aquarius, and exactly conjoins Saturn, and that occurs by the 28th. So the fact that Mercury is also conjoined by exact degree, all at 15 degrees of Aquarius at the time. Mars and Venus are, together still with Pluto. Yeah, a lot of things have to be worked out with other people. and it might not be that easy for you to do that, and you might have to eat a lot of humble pie here, and this might not be the easiest time of the year for you. And generally the sun conjoins Saturn, because it happens every year, it isn't the easiest time, but it is just a brief transit. They just meet and then they move on. So the 28th February is that, the very end of the month. And with Mercury conjoined here as well, it's just adding to that, and just a need to kind of maybe take a step back and hold back. And, whether it's in any kind of professional setting or personal, whatever it is, it's relational. And to think about that, and to think about how you're impacting other people. Because in the other way, yeah, the sun might be challenged here by being with Saturn, but there's so much strength from Mars coming from your sixth house that you might be, and that means it also is aspecting your sign. It might be that you're feeling just so like charged up at the same time in another way, but you maybe not so confident about what you're how you're engaging with other people. So for example, it might be work-wise and personally, you're doing something that makes you feel really empowered, but then when you engage with other people, that doesn't make you feel so great. So use that in whatever way you feel benefits you, especially like I said, if you think about the time frame of all of these planets conjoining Mars by mid-month leading up to that period, and then by the latter part of the month leading up to the 28th, your ruler Sun conjoins Saturn, that kind of relational issue that has to be dealt with. So just time it around that, I would say, because otherwise you're not making the use of these very powerful transits. The last thing I want to say is that the nodes continue through your eighth and second, Rahu in Pisces, the north node, Ketu in Virgo, the south node. And this could be some sort of, relationship dynamic in your family, your partner's family, your in-laws, money issues coming up here as well, and something to be, having to work, work something out here. And this could be quite complex. But if you get a balance right between, your money, their money, maybe especially if this were any kind of business venture, I would say just be really mindful of the money dynamics in that kind of partnership. If it's personal and any kind of relational issues that come up here, just be mindful again of the undercurrents and underlying complex financial dynamics that are going on here with the nodes in your second and eighth signs. And don't overly focus on, problems and obstacles in your life, even if there are there, to deal with them as rationally as you can, and to use the energy of this month, which is again there, to kind of push through your limitations and blocks and deal with others in a way that is more helpful to you and them. If you're just thinking about yourself in February, Leo, this isn't going to work out, because the sun is in Aquarius opposite. It's all about the others. It's all about another. And yeah, that would be something you have to pay attention to. So, Leo, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Virgo rising and or moon sign for February 2024. Virgo, your ruler Mercury is going to move into your fifth host sign Capricorn on the 1st of the month, and will conjoin Pluto with all the other planets, Mars and then Venus moving in also and conjoining Pluto. And so the fifth whole sign in your chart is very much about you planning your future. If you have children, it's related to that, or a romance that's blossoming. It's very much about something that you would love to do. And so obviously we plan the things that we love to do. So thinking about this now in terms of planning and strategy and all of that and speculation, I would caution you in terms of speculating about things without the full picture, because the reason I say that is because Mercury and all the other planets are conjoined Pluto. Pluto is underneath, it's hidden, it's your subconscious essentially, it's more unconscious, and you might not be aware of all the sort of things, the roadblocks, the bumps in the road that are, in your way. When you are aware of them and you really look at them and fully flesh it out, you can be more clear about actually what it takes to make plans moving forward. Now, obviously, any kind of engagement with children is important to deal with in a kind of very mature, responsible way, which is what Capricorn is all about, especially with Mars now coming in by the 5th of February and by the 14th of February in Valentine's Day. This is quite tricky because you've got Mars exactly conjunct Pluto on Valentine's Day. I mean, that is in the fifth house. Fifth house is very much about romance and fun. Mars and Pluto fun is, well, I don't know. Mars and Pluto fun is a bit intense. If you can bring that kind of intensity into the bedroom and not into arguments, I mean, I think that would be a better use of these transits. If you can again channel this Pluto energy from underneath and tap into this kind of reserves of energy, this powerful energy of Pluto in a more positive way, you're going to do you and your lover, and also again your children, fifth house is children, much better service here, and yourself, and enjoy this, and maybe even enjoy it. Like, I mean, generally Mars Pluto conjunctions don't seem like an enjoyable kind of time because there's like so many triggers that are potential here. But I think there can be enjoyment here. It's just maybe it's intense enjoyment. Mars again is there, but Venus will conjoin it as well in the days after. And so this is just something to be mindful of. It's one after the other getting triggered here. So as we see things progress, as your ruler Mercury moves from your fifth to your sixth, where the sun has already moved by the 12th, 13th of February, these now conjoin Saturn in your sixth. And so Mars and Venus now are conjoined by the 20th, 21st, 22nd. They kind of move alongside each other here in your fifth sign. Again, this is triggering and this is passionate, but it's intense. But it's again just being mindful of the triggers. So it's almost like having such a good time, but then you don't realize that this kind of intense interaction with this person has triggered something in you. Again, it could be positive, but being mindful of the intensity. Your ruler Mercury in your sixth whole sign now with the sun, and they all come together by the 28th. That is another whole ball game that is maybe better used in terms of being clear about the steps that it's going to take to do the thing that you love, and to continue doing that thing that you love after having thought about whatever it is that you want to plan for your life. The sixth house is very much about putting in steps, all the steps, the daily grind that's required in seeing this thing through. So the sixth house can sometimes get us bogged down in processing, but Virgo, that's what you're all about. You are the natural sixth sign of the zodiac anyway. So process systems, how do I implement this thing that I want to do? And if I want to be in this relationship, like, I need to work on it. If I want to have this thing, I need to work on it. That's what the sixth house is all about. Of course, you need to kind of find a balance here, because this is now, and especially by the 28th, Mercury, Sun, Saturn, all at the same degree. And so there might be a lot that you have to kind of just let go of here as well, while you're again planning and doing. And there's a lot of doing going on. Mars, especially because it's exalted, and there's a lot to do and a lot to plan. Absolutely. But again, Saturn, Sun, and Mercury, your ruler, suggests to kind of maybe taking a step back and just letting it go a bit, even in the sixth house, because even though the sixth house is very much about just doing it and getting on with it, and all of that's here, the sun is your 12th lord, which is about releasing and letting go and allowing and surrendering to whatever it is that's maybe happening at this stage. And I guess Sun Saturn conjunctions anyway, it happens every year. So once a year it happens. It generally is a more conflicted time, because there's a kind of like inbuilt sort of um pressure that we might feel about, how am I doing actually? I mean, am I doing it right? Is this right for me even? And is this, after I've planned all of this out, is this actually working out as I wanted it to? It might not feel that way necessarily, and yet still you have to keep going and plodding along and keep pushing through, because there's a lot of energy of pushing through in February. Mars is exalted, Sun is again, like I said, conjoined Saturn, which is powerful. Mars and Saturn both aspect Jupiter here in Aries. There's a lot of needing to kind of push through your blocks, in other words, in February. Now, the other thing to mention is that while all of this is taking place, of course, the nodes continue to move through your sign in opposites. So the North Node, Rahu, and Neptune in your seventh whole sign of the other, and Ketu, the South Node, settling into Virgo, into now Hasta, the lunar mansion in the middle of Virgo, which is symbol is the hand, Hasta. And it's very dexterous and it's very practical and down to earth, and likes to make things happen. The thing with Virgo is that it is good at making things happen and managing things and producing things, and it's skillful. But Ketu is not really interested in things at all. And so when it transits through your sign, it's likely going to get you to take a really deep look at yourself and is what is it that I'm doing actually? There's a lot of energy to do stuff in February, but Ketu overall is asking you, like, who am I actually? What am I doing? And who's doing the doing in a sense, if you want to put it in that way, even in a more existential way. And certainly with Saturn Sun conjunctions, they can feel existential, but with Ketu now in your sign, that could feel even more so the case. At the same time, with Rahu in your seventh sign and Neptune there, and Jupiter, the ruler of that, being aspected by Mars and Saturn, there's a lot of activity going on in relations as well. And so it might be that you're having such a heady, full-on, intense experience with other people, and it could be very fun, but then you're kind of getting lost in the mix and you're just like, who am I? What am I doing actually? What am I about? So that's something to think about in a general way and for some time for the rest of the year, in fact, into next year, because the nodes continue here until mid 2025. But because all the planets are starting to converge now together and sort of almost bottleneck here into the sign Pisces in the next few weeks, this is the start of a more intense phase, I think, to be mindful of. So for you, again, intensity doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It could be intensely good, but there are a lot of things happening. And use this energy, I would say, to push through, to do things, to focus, to implement things and get the daily routines right. And at the same time, be very open-minded about who you are anyway and how you can look at yourself in different ways and how that might open up different possibilities and how you do things and how you relate to others. So, Virgo, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. For Libra rising and or moon sign for February 2024. So, Libra, your ruler Venus is moving through Sagittarius for the first 10, 11 days. By the 11th, it moves into Capricorn, your fourth whole sign, where all the other planets are moving through. And first one to move in is Mercury on the 1st of the month. Then on the 5th of February, we have Mars move in, and then your ruler on the 11th. And they all conjoin with Pluto in your fourth. So there's a lot going on here in your home and lots to work out and lots of things that could be potentially triggering. Now, if I show you here by the 14th of the month on Valentine's Day, we have your ruler Venus having moved into your fourth house. We have Mars, which moved in on the 5th and now exactly conjunct Pluto. Mercury moved in on the 1st, so it can join Pluto in the first few days of the month. But this is a lot of triggers here going on in your home situation. And I think if you're just mindful of that in February, and especially around Valentine's, that I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't get triggered or it's a bad thing or, oh no, you shouldn't do that. No, I think just to be more mindful of it. And if you do feel triggered in some way, if somebody triggers you, and especially when I say that, I mean partner more especially, or somebody in your family, because Mars is your second and seventh lord, to just, I guess, just to be mindful of it. I mean, how you react is how you react, right? But once you're mindful of it, I think there's a lot you can do with these transits because Mars is so powerful. And maybe because it's so powerful, that's what's so triggering, right? But also you can take that on. You can actually, the challenge that somebody might pose to you in your home situation might be what you need to rise to the occasion. Because with Venus now lost in the mix in a way of all of this, it's kind of like it's not a great month despite being Valentine's. It's not the best month in a way for just cordial and sort of everyone being nice and let's just keep everything peaceful and not rock the boat. This is a rock the boat kind of month for sure. It's explosive, it's triggering, it's powerful. Individually, we're all going to feel like charged up. But for you, Libra, because you're so focused on other people and how other people impact you and how you impact other people, this again, because they're also personal, these transits in your fourth house, you might just take all of this to heart and not use these transits for what they're good for, which is basically, again, pushing through something and doing something. So if there's something to be done at home, I would use this energy to do it, like a spring clean. I don't know, something like that. But whatever needs to be done, whatever needs to be taken on, these are really good times, I think, to do it. If you were just to try and sit around and not deal with these transits, that's when it's going to, bite you on the ass, pardon my French. And so if you take it on, then it's more likely something that you respond well to as opposed to react strongly to. The sun you can see here has moved into your fifth house sign, and the other planets will start to move into your fifth as well in the coming weeks. So that's a shift from your fourth to your fifth to something more enjoyable. Now, enjoyable when it comes to Saturn is a funny word to apply to Saturn because Saturn doesn't seem to be, out to enjoy itself. Saturn is very much about being responsible, and you're wondering, well, how can I be responsible and have a good time? They don't seem to go well together, these two. And that's why Saturn isn't said to be, that well placed in the fifth. But, I would argue that actually you can have a good time and still be responsible. And actually, Saturn is not only well placed for you, it's in its, own sign, Aquarius, but it is such a powerful planet for you. It rules your fourth and the fifth. So absolutely, I think, yes, you need to be responsible, and especially around children. If you have children, this is obviously one of the things you're going to be really focused on in the next period. So the first half of the month, in a way, kind of is this kind of home dynamic situation coming up to the mid-month period where there's a lot of triggers. And then the second half of the month leading up to the last part, and actually the second last day on the 28th, is another trigger, which is the Sun-Saturn conjunction. And it's also Mercury. So all of them, so Sun, Saturn, and Mercury, all of them meeting here at the middle of Aquarius in your fifth house sign. Again, if you have children, be mindful there of triggers. Maybe taking a step back now and being mindful of how you're dealing with your children, but also maybe in a relationship. And well, not maybe, but most certainly this will impact relationships because Mars and Saturn both aspect your seventh sign, where Jupiter and Uranus are. So there's definitely everything sort of coming to a head in a way and beginning in February. And the next few weeks, I think, are going to be intense, but that could be, again, intensely good as you push through some issues, as you overcome things, as you deal with things. It's just that intensity in many ways can just feel like just that, and you might not feel as effective in any one thing. But with the strength of Mars exalted, the strength of Saturn, and now its conjunction with Sun and Mercury, Saturn is really ruling the roost. And when we consider that, I think for you, that's positive ultimately, Libra. You just have to, again, be very responsible in what you're doing, again, at home and with your children and any enjoyments, and to give yourself some time to enjoy them. Like that's maybe a better way of explaining Saturn in the fifth. If responsibility and fun are, two words we could apply here, then maybe just giving yourself the time to have fun, or another two words, time and fun. So time for fun. That's Saturn in the fifth. So think about that because Saturn and Sun now conjoined with Mercury, I think is a time to, yes, have fun, but also not overdo it, essentially, because the Sun as your 11th Lord is very much about social life. But, and again, in your fifth house now with Saturn, which rules the fifth, and Mercury there too. But again, it's all, they kind of all just gathered together, and Saturn's Sun generally feels a bit more conflicted, and we might feel under par, and we might feel challenged by something or someone, and not so much triggered in that sense, but just maybe there's a kind of block here that we're meeting, or the energy just isn't there, and at the same time, it's still potentially fun for you, Libra. There's something here to enjoy for sure. And again, just be mindful of your relationships, I would say, because obviously with all of this impact on your seventh house continuing from all these planets, Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter, Uranus coming together in your seventh, just I think all of this could be easily taken out on your partner, in other words. So just being mindful of that. Then to finish, Rahu and Ketu continue in your sixth and 12th house. And this, with everything else that's happening, shows there's maybe a lot of intense focus on, work and day-to-day stuff and dealing with problems and overcoming issues. Maybe it's with the children, maybe it's with paying the bills, maybe it's with work routines, health regimes, maybe your healthy eating habits haven't really kicked in properly yet and you're really focusing a lot on them and maybe what's not right with them. Rahu can tend to sort of skew things, so just be mindful of overblowing issues, problems. And then while Ketu's in your 12th house and settling in there is about really maybe just practically finding steps to allow yourself to shut off and to recuperate, because there's just a lot going on. It's very busy. your chart in terms of your home life, in terms of kids, in terms of work, in terms of relationships. These are all obviously very busy now with all of these houses impacting in your chart. So the only thing that you have on the opposite side of the zodiac is the 12th house to help you just switch off. And the 12th house is switching off in very different ways. Like meditation is 12th house, sleep is 12th house, but so is like drinking alcohol and taking drugs and tripping out, in a sense. And obviously, there are healthy options in the 12th house and not so healthy options, but you still need to kind of switch off in order for you to be more effective at the other stuff that I mentioned. So, Libra, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Scorpio rising and or moon sign for February 2024. So Scorpio, Mars, your ruler, is about done with Sagittarius, your second whole sign, and it's about to move into your third whole sign, Capricorn, where it's exalted. So this is absolutely good news on several fronts. First one is the fact that it's exalted. Simply that Mars going into Capricorn on the 5th of February means that your ruling planet is in great dignity and feeling very strong. So personally, obviously, that's an empowering time for you. And the fact that it's your third whole sign where Mars is right at home, because Mars is about fighting your corner and sticking up for yourself and doing something and following your interests and being enterprising and communicating very effectively and clearly and deliberately. And you can see where this is all going to go wrong quite quickly, right? But it's really strong. And where it could go wrong quite quickly is the fact that Mars is sometimes just overblown and does too much and doesn't know when to quit and, says things that it probably shouldn't say. And this is more especially the case because of Pluto conjoined Mars by the 14th. So Valentine's Day is going to be interesting for sure. So Mars and Pluto conjoined by the 14th is a big trigger here in your third house. So I would say to be really mindful because Mars, of course, is also your sixth lord in your third house. There's some trigger here and dealing with other people. Like this is best kept in the bedroom, I would say, and the passions of this kind of configuration with Venus having joined it from the 11th, and Venus will conjoin Pluto then, and then also Mars by the end of February. And Mercury's been here since the 1st of February. It's all kind of culminating in your third house, and always obviously also in your fourth house, as we'll talk about. So again, these planets, Mars especially, would be better suited to Capricorn and the third house. And again, being gung-ho about doing something, and its aspect onto your sixth house now is far better for you, I think, than its exchange that it had in Sagittarius between the 2nd and the 6th. So that actually might have created a problem in January for you in terms of your health. But now it's moving into your third house, aspecting Jupiter in your 6th. This is where I think is a great time for you to push through your limitations, your blocks, and overcome health issues and just overcome issues generally. 6th house is where, like, that's where your weaknesses lie. And so Mars aspecting from its strongest position, as triggered as it might be, I think it's a great time to, like, get it out of your system, speak it out, sing it out, whatever, write it out, whatever it is that you need to do. But I think this is a great time to push through that. Again, the downside is that you overdo that and you make, some enemies along the way. And that's something to be mindful of. While all of this is happening and all of this gathering of planets conjoin Pluto and all of these triggers that are going on, Sun is moving into Aquarius by mid-month, and then we'll conjoin Saturn with Mercury moving in as well. Now, this is another whole ball game where, fourth house is really activated now and has been, of course, with Saturn here, the last couple of years, really nearly. And Saturn, though strong in your fourth house, its aspect from your fourth to your sixth and your first and your 10th. It's really impacting you personally and professionally in a lot of ways. Personally, obviously, because it's in your fourth, which is the home, and there's some issue here around the home, and you might be having to deal with some issues, as well as maybe with your mother, or your mother might be having to deal with issues. But on top of that, then its aspect to your first is it's impacting you very personally, and you can feel it. But its aspect to your sixth and 10th, that's the Saturn aspect onto Aries, Leo, is obviously impacting your work. And you might say that actually work benefits more from that because you just kind of like you're challenged, but you get on with it. Whereas it's not as hard with the personal, with the professional as it is with the personal challenges that Saturn can bring. On the other hand, here we've got the Sun now conjoined, the 10th Lord conjoined Saturn, and that is exact by the 28th. So Mercury conjoins them as well, all by the same degree by the 28th. And I think this is where, considering your work life and home life and work life balance, considering that this is an exact conjunction by the 28th of February, it's the time to take a step back, I would say. That if you're trying to push through this limitation, which is likely to present itself at this point, whether it's because of the home situation or your mother or it's working from home, or there's some issue here about getting the work-life balance right, or it's been, not at home and you're just working all the time. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's fourth house, fifth, and 10th house. And this is the time to kind of maybe, just take that step back, because it happens every year. It's not unusual, but as it does, and as Saturn and Sun come together on the 28th, it's a time just to kind of maybe rest more. And again, for you more professionally, take a step back. And also throughout this whole period, you still got Mars and Venus together, and they're very closely together, and right through the end of the month, really, the last 2 weeks especially. So this is kind of again this trigger, and Venus is kind of, obviously not kind of, but very much impacted here. And Venus is your partner. And so this is a trigger. And, Venus being so sensitive and being impacted by your powerful Mars now and Pluto, just mind, I would say, your partner. Mind what you say. Don't burn your bridges, and don't burn your bridges with other people, not just your partner. Because you might just feel so gung-ho about doing something and overcoming something and pushing through something and challenging yourself to do that, that you really rub other people up the wrong way. As long as you're mindful of it, you're not going to overdo it. And again, combined with the Saturn Sun, professionally and personally, again, home life, work life, there's something that you're trying to juggle here, and maybe it just feels like you just can't keep all the balls up in the air. Finally, then just want to talk about the nodes, Rahu and Ketu in your 5th and 11th house, settling in here. Ketu moving into Hasta, your Lord Ketu, into the more skillful area of Virgo, and about manifestation and making things happen and making things full stop. Ketu, on the other hand, is not really interested in things. It's more interested in deeper aspects of life. And so this is something to gauge now, because it's going to be more and more important as the months go by in 2024, as Ketu and Rahu move through these signs, that you have to find something here that gives your life more depth. Either people in your social circles, friends, or even online social like media and things like that. Maybe you're thinking about pulling back from that because of Ketu. Maybe a friend or you and a friend are pulling back. Maybe you're reconnecting with an old friend. That could be Ketu as well. But whatever it is, this change is happening here in your social circles. And it's really pointing to deeper changes that are happening within your own ambitions and your how, wide you've cast the net. And you might want to connect with different people here at this point. But that's not to be avoided while Rahu continues through your 5th sign with Neptune, and you focusing on all of these 5th house matters, which is very much about like having lots of fun. And Rahu really exaggerates and possibly even distorts this. So it's like, yeah, fun could be quite intense, I would say, this year for you, Scorpio, and that's not a bad thing. And especially once Jupiter moves out of Aries by May. I mean, with Jupiter in Aries, it's not so fun right now for you, Scorpio. It might appear to be because of Rahu, but Jupiter is having the last say here, and Jupiter's in the 6th sign, and now Jupiter's been aspected by Mars and by Saturn, and there's a lot for you to overcome. And so that seems like it's just hard to have fun when you have all of these issues you have to deal with. It could be health issues or work issues. But once you deal with all those, and you will, and again, February is the starting of really dealing with them, by the time we get to May, once Jupiter moves into Taurus, you're going to feel obviously that there's a lot more fun on the cards, a lot more enjoyment. And I want to just remind you, as you have that kind of very fun time, to not neglect your friends and to not neglect also your bigger ambitions. That's Ketu in the 11th house. And yes, to have the fun, but just to find the balance between the two. So, Scorpio, I hope that's been of help. I wish you all the best for the month of February, and until next time. for Sagittarius rising and or moon sign for February 2024. So Sagittarius, Jupiter, your ruler, continues through your fifth house sign, with Mars having moved through your sign in January, as well as Venus and Mercury. They're all about to start moving out now. But I'm sure it's been like a bit of a party here with all the planets in your sign and exchanging Mars and Jupiter with your first and fifth house exchange. That also could have been a lot of fun. Fifth house is literally just fun, right? So now things are moving on in a different way, and there might be some things to deal with here in terms of family dynamics and finances. And so if you have a lot of fun and, maybe it would imply that there's some, fun with your children, for example. Now it's kind of like getting, okay, let's get on with the next stage. And so let's look at the next stage. And the next stage is beginning already when Mercury moves in on the 1st of February to your second sign. And then in a few days, it then conjoins Pluto. By the 5th, at that stage, Mars moves in. And then on the 11th, Venus moves in. So you have all of these planets move into your second sign. And very strong Mars, exalted. Mercury is also seen, and Venus are both seen as they're in a friendly environment. They're all ruled by Saturn. And so Saturn has the last say in everything. And Saturn continues to aspect your ruler, Jupiter. And it aspects Jupiter quite closely by degree. So you can't really ignore any of these issues here, even though, again, there could be some fun. That's still fifth house. It's Mars's fourth house aspect now combined with Saturn's third house aspect that is going on that might feel a little more tense than has been of late, because the exchange of Mars and Jupiter in January was more easeful and easy, and Venus helped along. Now Venus and Mars and Mercury and Sun move through your second sign, conjoin Pluto, and again, especially Mars aspecting your fifth sign and Saturn currently. That is a lot of kind of pressure and tension maybe that's going on here in your fifth sign. Now, the fifth sign isn't just about fun, of course, it's about planning your future. Whether or not you have children or not, it's about the future, and it's about speculation. It's about implementing a plan and obviously creating your life. It's like we're constantly creating our life in the fifth house. And I think there's a lot that is potential here, obviously with Jupiter and Uranus here. And as they come together closer and closer over the next few weeks and months, I think there's a lot that you can be open to here in very positive ways. But in February, it just feels like there's some tension that has to be overcome as well. And maybe something that you have to push through, maybe a plan that you want to push through. Maybe there's some issue that you're dealing with your children. Maybe there's something you'd love to do, but you have to kind of think about the finances around it. That's second sign aspecting the fifth sign. If there are any family dynamics at all, this could feel like tense. Now, the fact that Pluto and Mars come together by the exact degree by the 14th on Valentine's Day, that's a major trigger to be really mindful of, to be mindful of your P's and Q's, I would say. But at the same time, not to bite your lip so much that you bury it deep and that kind of erupts in other ways. I don't think that would be useful to you at all. I think the Mars-Pluto conjunction in your second sign is asking you to say what you need to say to kind of bring it up from your subconscious, whatever it is that's been kind of bugging you. And, it could be again to do with family, some family member that you have to say something to that you really don't want to deal with, but you have to. Or it's that you have, you deal with them and they say something and it triggers you and, you hadn't planned it. Or you just say something to anybody. That's the thing. This is something to be mindful of. The sun moves into Aquarius then by the mid-month period as well, around Valentine's, a couple of days before. And then it's going to conjoin Saturn by the end of the month. And by the 28th of February, we've got Sun, Saturn exactly conjoined with Mercury, all at the same degree. So I'll just show you that here. This is going to be obviously a whole other story, but there's a kind of tension that can build with the Saturn-Sun conjunction. And that story, is the same every year. Every year the Sun meets with Saturn. But it doesn't always meet with Saturn in such a strong position. Saturn is very strong at the moment. It's in Aquarius, in the middle of Aquarius. It's so powerful. And it's in your third host sign, which is also a good place to put Saturn. But when you combine that with the Mars and the Venus as they continue to move through your second sign with Pluto, and we think about how you're communicating now, I think this could be a lot of triggers and how that might impact your children, for example, or a partner or any other really. And again, it's essentially because the second sign is about speech and there could be some like things said. Third sign is about your ability to communicate in other ways, but also to be able to listen. Saturn Sun conjunctions in your third house. Yeah, the ninth lord in your third house. There's something to be mindful of here and take a step back from and truly listening to what's being said. And maybe just, and a need, and maybe it's just the day on the 28th of February. It might be that it's leading up to this, but it could be this need to listen. The fact that Mercury, your seventh lord, and the 10th lord, so implicating, relationships, whether it's professional or personal, is just here, like your partner, everything kind of conjoined here together. Again, in your third house of engagement, of interaction, of communication and listening and of wanting. It's like there's a want here that you have, obviously, and Mars continues to aspect your fifth house while Saturn aspects your fifth house from the second and the third house. There's something desperately that you want here, that you want so dearly, that if anyone in any way kind of feels like they're blocking you in February, which they might, there might be some trigger here, or you might feel the trigger where they're not intentionally blocking you or nothing's actually blocking you at all. It's just a trigger. Then you could react very strongly. And that's something just to be mindful of, Sagittarius. The last thing to talk about are the nodes, Rahu and Ketu. The North Node Rahu in Pisces, Ketu in Virgo. They're really settling into their groove now in these signs. Your home and career are being impacted. And so there might be some shakeups here that are happening this year and next year. Ketu is moving into Hasta in the middle of Virgo, so it's really getting into this sort of more skill-orientated role. But Ketu is not really interested in things where Virgo is. So this is something just to be mindful of in terms of, what skills are you developing here and maybe upskilling, perhaps. And this might suggest a need to upskill Ketu and Virgo and Hasta. And while you're doing that, and maybe, not neglecting that as well, so don't put that off, I would say, that you're maybe focusing a lot on your fourth house, home and happiness, and together with, like I said, all of those other transits in the second and third and aspecting the fifth, there's something here obviously you want dearly. And while you're focusing so much on that, Rahu can sometimes, exaggerate something to the point where it's completely distorted in your mind's eye and where you're not clear about that thing. So there could be some home situation here that you would like. And it could involve, again, like I said, children, family members, and things like that. Whoever it involves, there's something to be mindful of here in terms of how, you might have the picture wrong. There might be something off here. And so to take sort of a step back from that is helpful, and to focus on, again, work and upskilling and improving your work skills if it's not upskilling, and focusing on doing a good job, essentially, Ketu and Virgo in your 10th house. And if you can do that, then I think you're getting the balance right. So that is the balance between, again, 4th and 10th, work, home life balance. So, Sagittarius, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Capricorn rising and or moon sign for February 2024, Capricorn, Saturn, your ruler, continues through your second whole sign, Aquarius, where by the end of February, it will meet with the Sun by exact degree, as well as Mercury, which is about to move into your sign on the 1st of February. And so this kind of culminates in a way by the end of the month into something that has to be dealt with in terms of family dynamics and finances. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but Saturn Sun conjunctions can sometimes feel a bit draining. Let me put it that way, because it means that the Sun conjunct Saturn means Saturn's combust, means Saturn's not visible, means your Lord, your ruling planet, is not visible. And so a lot of Capricorns might feel a bit burnt out now, and that's especially if you're Capricorn rising more so. But I think if there's any strong indications of Capricorn, that's something that's kind of feeling the rays of the sun, the purification in one way, and that can strengthen in another way your resolve. But again, it kind of could lead to that. It's kind of leading up to the end of the month in that sense. So, but before we get there, let's back it up and see how Mercury on the 1st moves into your sign and conjoins Pluto by the 5th, by which time Mars moves into your sign. And then a few days after that, on the 11th, Venus moves into your sign. So there's a lot going on in your sign, obviously, in February. By the mid-month period, And by Valentine's on the 14th, so much going on. So you got the sun here, obviously, for the first couple of weeks. You got Mercury, then Mars, then Venus, all conjoined Pluto. And by the 14th, as the sun moves into your second sign, Mars and Pluto come to the exact same degree. So Valentine's is obviously a time to be really mindful of your relationships, though Venus is in your sign now, and that's more positive, and they all aspect your seventh sign. This could be some major trigger in your relationships that you have to be really mindful of, and how it can really make you take a really long, hard look at yourself and go deeply into yourself. And you might do that to excess in a way. You might feel like, oh, I don't know why that happened. Why did I get triggered by that person? You might overdo that kind of analysis. Pluto's transit through your sign, though it's a long, long one, and it's slow in its processing, it can feel like, you're going so deeply into yourself that sometimes you lose perspective in a way. And it's important not to bury so deeply into yourself that you lose yourself. In a way, it's kind of like ironic when you think about Pluto, is that sometimes when we're analyzing something so deeply, we bury down into it so much when we're researching something, when we're changing something so fundamentally from the inside out, that actually we don't even see things properly. It's like we need to come up for air and see things from a whole different viewpoint, to get a bigger view on things. So that's something to think about in the long term. But I think with all of these planets moving through your sign, conjoining Pluto in the short term in February, there's just going to be a lot of things that are more obviously triggered. So that might have been going on for some time, all of that Pluto stuff. But now Mars, Mercury first week, then Mars second week, and then Venus third week of February, all triggering Pluto. But the Mars Pluto in particular is a trigger, major one. And so again, just to be mindful of your relationships, any kind of socializing, to be mindful of that. And even at home, even if you don't go out, because Mars is your fourth lord and it's aspecting your fourth house, where Jupiter and Uranus are moving together. There's some triggers here for sure in your private life, in your personal life, but also in your social life and your relationships. So the sun, like I said, has moved into your second sign, and this is when, again, the sun is becoming combust then by the end of the month. And this is just a time to be mindful of your energy levels in general. Just to take a step back, I would say, to pull back, to be mindful of your diet as well, to really clean up your diet, to be, eating things that are healthy and helpful for you, to energize you and not drain you. The sun is your eighth lord, so the things that, might not be very clear about. And I think that's important now with Mercury also moving in by the 20th. Mercury, your sixth lord in your second house. There could be some issues here, obviously, around diet and, apart from the bigger issues that, I mentioned in relationships and maybe more, especially now, mm, family dynamics in a general way, in a kind of broader sense. Again, personally, I think maybe diet is something to look at. But again, by the 28th, that is the exact conjunction of Saturn Sun. This is when Saturn, your ruler, is combust and conjoin Mercury, your sixth lord, and the ninth lord, and Sun, the eighth lord. There's a lot kind of here hinging really on family and all of that, but also, again, feeling well, and again, how that ties in with family supports and finances is one side of it, but then food and healthy lifestyles and all of that is another one. And feeling, just good about yourself and what you're doing and what you're eating, I think is a big part of this. Because as all of this is happening, of course, Mars and Venus are moving alongside each other all month. And although that can be enjoyable, I think this is more enjoyable in a sense for you, that there can be some many interesting dynamic, interactions with people with Venus, Mars, and interesting because of Pluto, but still, interesting and fun. I mean, I don't think it's, going to be, that hard. I think it's going to be just fun, right? Venus and Mars. But again, this Saturn Sun, it's almost like it's maybe too much fun. And that's why if you keep on top of things in terms of diet and that you're not overdoing the partying and drinking and eating and all of that, that there is then this balancing act that you can achieve. And all of that will help feed into you, pardon the pun, but feed into your fourth house and more happiness. And your home life can be, feeling like, okay, I've done what I need to do. I've done a clear out, maybe I've improved my diet and I feel good, right? That's Mars aspecting the fourth house. So it's like feeling good about yourself, feeling good about, having done a spring clean perhaps. February will be a great time for a spring clean for sure with Mars. Saturn through your second house aspecting your fourth house. I feel good because I've done a personal cleanse, a detox, and I feel good because I'm eating well. And so there's a lot of potential here to feel good, in other words. The last thing I want to mention are the nodes, Rahu and Ketu. North node Rahu together with Neptune in your third, and South node Ketu in your ninth. And Ketu settling into Virgo now and into Hasta, lunar mansion in the middle of Virgo, is very much about focusing on skills and skillful thinking. I would say is probably a better description of the nodes in the third and the ninth by transit. And to think skillfully means to think deeply about things, I would say, and to question thoughts that you have and beliefs that you have, I would say, is another one. To not take things blindly in a way, to listen carefully and to take advice, but also then to think about things deeply. And to think about things means the third house, like apply it. Like, does this make sense? Is this actually true? Does this, now I have to be careful here with my words, because if I say with Rahu and Jupiter's obviously getting an aspect from Rahu, is that sometimes we can confuse intuition with feeling, and feeling is a different thing. Feeling is just how you feel, right? Or how you think. Intuition is deeper than thinking or feeling. It's a deeper sense of knowing. And I think that's this thing that could be challenged at this time. And the knowing can come, of course, but Rahu can, eventually bring it, but usually it kind of brings a block, and you're not clear about something and you don't really know what the truth is. But again, if you get good advice and don't neglect the Ketu side of things and skillful advice from Virgo, then you're more clear about things and you have a deeper intuitive nudge that is confirmed to you by that advice, I would say. So that's a better way of getting the balance right between the third and ninth house. To, again, not avoid the advice, but also not completely, try and develop your own formula for what is true. That there needs to be a balance between both. You don't want to overdo the advice either, because if you get only advice and you don't listen to your own gut instincts, and again beyond the mind, then you're not dealing with both of these nodes in their best way. So that's the nodes in your third and ninth house, and that is the month of February. So Capricorn, I hope that has been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. For Aquarius rising and or moon sign for February 2024. Aquarius, your ruler Saturn continues through your sign, and your other ruler, Rahu, continues through your second sign. And of course, this focuses you on you and what you have to say. And I mean that in many ways, not just what comes out of your mouth, but also what you have to say in terms of not just the words, but something more creative. And I say that because Saturn in your first sign aspects your third. And in February, Mars, which rules your 10th of work, moves into your 12th and aspects the third also. So there's very much a lot of emphasis in February on self-expression. So whether that's through some creative means or any other means, even just communication in other ways like writing or art or something like that, or just again self-expression in some sort of being clear about what you're trying to say. Essentially, this is what these the transits here are, I think, representing. So going back to Saturn, though, your ruling planet Saturn in your sign, and Saturn in a way ruling all of the planets in February, in a sense, all of the planets moving into Capricorn, in Aquarius, and then the planets in Aries that it aspects, which is Jupiter. And of course, Rahu is in Jupiter's sign. So really all of the planets are under the thumb of Saturn, your ruler. That can be a positive thing in many ways, but in another way, of course, Saturn is about focus and hard work and being very deliberate in what you're doing. And of course, again, in your communication. So being very deliberate and focused on communicating something at this point, and maybe doing something differently as well. The fact that all these planets are moving through your 12th sign, now again, from the first, it's Mercury moving in, then from the 5th, it's Mars, and then from the 11th, it's Venus. So all of these planets have now moved into your 11th or 12th house sign. Now, I do think that there's with so much emphasis on the 12th house, there's a lot that you have to drop at this point in many ways as well, and or maybe take on in other ways, because the 12th house is very much about the more unconscious or subconscious aspects of you. So perhaps getting into some more creative fields at this time might be more helpful, and thinking about things differently in more creative ways, putting systems in place that help you think creatively about things in different ways will help you express yourself in different ways. So that's especially because of Mars in your 12th sign aspecting your third sign. And Mars is going to conjoin Pluto by the 14th. So Valentine's Day, 14th of February, is going to be quite interesting. A lot of triggers that are potential there, with Venus now moving into your 12th from the 11th. And I think there could be some, a lot of passions that could be expressed here. And this would probably be best expressed in the bedroom, to be quite honest, than, in professional settings, because the 10th Lord Mars in the 12th conjoin Pluto on Valentine's Day. That is, and really for the whole month of February, because of that conjunction, I think is a major trigger. And so to be really mindful not to get triggered by, people in a professional setting, because obviously that won't be deemed to be professional, right? So if you lash out, or if you speak out, or if you say something inappropriate, I think just being very mindful. And I do think that you are mindful, and that is especially because of Saturn moving through your sign and ruling all of these planets. So even if you're feeling that, you might not directly say anything. It's just what it might do to you otherwise if you hold everything back all the time and not say it. And at the same time, it is still about holding things back and restraining it and focusing it, and being very deliberate. This is also because of the conjunctions with Saturn and including the Sun. So the Sun conjoins Saturn, and that occurs on the 28th by exact degree. And Mercury is there as well by the same degree. Sun, Saturn, Mercury all together in your first sign. Sun, your seventh lord, conjoins Saturn. This is maybe more challenging when we combine this with the Venus, the Mars and Pluto, especially in your 12th sign, because relations might be a bit strained at this point. Sun Saturn conjunctions are generally more strained, but especially in your sign, because it means that, of course, the opposite Sun in your sign, where Saturn is very strong, so your relationship might be challenged. But then Saturn itself, your ruling planet, is combust, is not visible. So you might feel the effects of this, and it might affect you very personally. And even energetically, you might feel a bit drained by this kind of energy. So by the end of February, just to be mindful of the buildup of this throughout the month, where triggers are there, and then those triggers kind of setting things off, and then you kind of feeling the aftermath of that, and kind of being burnt out really by the end of February. And that's something to be really mindful of in dealing with other people. Again, whether professionally or personally, I think there are triggers both in both ways. So just to be mindful of dealing with anybody, I would say, and being careful in how you approach people and how they are dealing with you, and try and keep a balance here, and maybe try and take a step back by the end of February. I want to mention as well the nodes Rahu and Ketu, the North Node Rahu and Neptune, both in Pisces, your second sign, and Ketu in your eighth sign, Virgo. Ketu now settling into Virgo, into Hasta lunar mansion in the middle of Virgo, and it is very sort of precise and analytical and all of that. But Ketu itself in Virgo, in Hasta, can be analytical even more so. And the eighth house is very much about things that are impeding our progress in a way, and traumas that we haven't overcome. And Ketu can certainly help dredge these up, and to be able to deal with them and process them and skillfully negotiate with them and interact with them in a way. But at the same time, on the other side of that, Ketu can sometimes show a neglect of dealing with those things. And the eighth house is also about the partner's family. And so your in-laws, for example, as well, or financial issues that maybe need to be dealt with that maybe you're not looking at. And because of that, maybe you're overly focusing on Rahu, your Lord, in that second house, and really focusing on what you have to say and not listening to others, and really focusing on your own values and your own money and making your own money. And again, this could be, it's not a bad thing, but it just could be overdone, where you lose a balance here between the second and eighth. Second and eighth is very much about financial issues and values, and again, between you and your partner, between you and others. And when you add this into the other dynamics that are going on with the transits in terms of, relationship dynamics and communication and expression and self-expression, and all of these things could really get triggered in February, essentially, because relationship things themselves are triggering. But when you add in financial aspects that are also very triggering, it could absolutely be where there's just too much emphasis on one thing and not enough on another. And one thing might be just too much. And so the balance of that is to step back and do less and just observe in a more detached way, perhaps. So, Aquarius, that is the month of February. I hope that's been of help. And as always, I wish you the very best. And until next time, for Pisces rising and or moon sign for February 2024, Pisces, your ruler Jupiter continues through Aries, your second host sign. And although its exchange with Mars in your 10th house sign was, I think, a very positive transit overall. Not that there weren't any complications here, of course, because Mars in your 10th aspects your first. That's a whole other. But now Mars is moving out of this configuration and into an aspect to Jupiter. So let me just show you that first. So by the 5th of February, Mars moves into Capricorn, into your 11th host sign, and aspects your second host sign, where Jupiter is in its sign. And so Mars obviously is ruling that in a sense. It's impacting Jupiter in a bigger way. Jupiter, your ruler, doesn't have as strong a say in a sense because it has to abide by the rules of Aries in a way, the sign Aries being ruled by Mars. But at the same time, Saturn also continues to aspect Jupiter almost by degree in this trinal aspect, or sorry, a sextile aspect. It's a third house aspect from Saturn to Jupiter. And Saturn itself rules Mars and all these other planets that are moving into Capricorn now, your 11th sign. So basically, Saturn is sort of the head honcho here. Saturn is really ruling the roost. It's the ultimate ruler of all of these in a way. And then, that's calling the shots. And so Saturn in your 12th house sign, aspecting your Jupiter here in your second sign, it is obviously having an impact on you. It can be positive, absolutely, but it's only positive when you are willing to do the work and put the effort in. Third house aspects are about making effort. And Saturn certainly is about that. And that is potential. But because Saturn's in your 12th sign, it's as much about making the effort to let something go in a way. It might seem a bit odd to kind of suggest this effort in any way linked to the 12th sign, which is itself about surrender. How can you effort in sleeping, for example? How do you make so much effort when you're when you're meditating? Well, you know that there is a way you can do that. There are things that you can do to set that up, that sleep is more likely. There's a way that you can begin a concentration exercise to therefore then lead to a meditation. So there are things you can do, and I think practically for you, Pisces, there's something that needs to be let go of here. There's something that needs an ending. And overall, like I've been saying, Saturn in your 12th sign is an overall ending phase of something, some big ambition maybe that you were thinking about. And it might also be the completion of a project you've been working on in the next year. Saturn will be here until March 2025 before it moves into your sign. So I think that there definitely could be a sort of ending a project here before you move on and create something new. But again, while Saturn is aspecting your ruler, Jupiter, in your second sign, this is very much about the dynamics that are involved and a lot of the financial dynamics that are involved, like the savings and spending that is involved in any ambition that you have. That's second and 12th signs. It also has an impact, of course, on diet because second sign is food and 12th sign is fasting. So diet as well is going to have an impact here. The fact that Mars is now moving into Capricorn, Saturn sign, aspecting Jupiter, your ruler, in your second sign from this 11th, I definitely think this is again financial in many ways because it's about maybe more earnings. There could be something here where there's more earnings or there's a lot of focus on earnings and also on your ambitions. So Mars, as I said, moves in on the 5th and Mercury has moved in on the 1st already. And Mercury itself by the 5th has conjoined Pluto. And then on the 14th, Mars conjoins Pluto. So this is a bit tricky, to say the least. I mean, Mars-Pluto conjunctions are quite complex. And I would say, in terms of family matters, in terms of speech and communicating what is you think is true, and you might believe it to be true, but whether or not it is, it's more so the way you're communicating it. Mars conjunct Pluto could really kind of blow up in a way. And Pisces, you're not the individual to, to say that thing that is hurtful usually. But the thing is, it's when you're triggered, you're triggered. And this Mars Pluto conjunction is a trigger. And because it's happening in your 11th sign, it could be in terms of like dealing with friends or something, or elder siblings, or just in any kind of social setting. I would be really mindful of triggers here. And it may be that other people are getting triggered. Like you don't mean to do it, but like other people find it triggering. Venus is here as well. And so this is kind of just adding to it in a way where there's kind of a lot of triggers. First we had Mercury conjoined Pluto, Mars, then Pluto, and then finally Venus, Pluto, and then Venus, Mars, all in your 11th house. So there's a lot of, communication is going to be important in February. In other words, Pisces, very important. The sun then moves into Aquarius, your sign, last sign, by the 12th, 13th, and then it conjoins Saturn by the 28th. So this is where, I think that, let me just bring it back to your sign. So you can see here Saturn, Sun, and Mercury all at the same degree, 15-degree mark of Aquarius, your 12th sign. So Mercury getting involved in this as well, and all the triggers could show that there's some issue here as well in your relationship, and not just romantic and personal relationships either. It could be business relationships and home life and all of that. There's something here that has to be let go of, because not only a Saturn Sun conjunction, but a Saturn Sun Mercury. And Saturn Sun every year is a bit more tense. It pits two energies against each other that don't work well together. It's like light and dark in a sense. And the sun being your sixth lord in your 12th house is something to let go of here. Some way you're doing things that's not working, and you have to kind of end it and do it some other way. And again, because your home life and relationship is being impacted here, or implicated here at least, that there could be something along those lines. And Saturn, again, your 12th lord, is ruling this space. So it really kind of has to have the final say in a way. And again, maybe it's just about letting something go here at this point, Pisces. Now Saturn itself is combust because it's with the sun, so it's not visible. So Saturn itself is sort of hindered in a way. And that can lead to its own issues in terms of maybe not being able to see clearly into the consequences of what you're doing or what's happening. And so this all just adds to the very kind of combustible but also very triggering situations that could occur in February. It could be with family, it could be with friends, it could be with your relationship, it could be with people in general. And it could be just that you're not seeing that it's not clear. And so that's why it's so triggering. You don't know what's going on when you add it with Pluto. So that's Saturn's sun. The last thing I'll say, and the really important thing to talk about, are the nodes as they continue through your sign and opposite. North node Rahu in your sign with Neptune, and Ketu south node in your seventh sign, which is now moving into Hasta lunar mansion in the middle of Virgo. And Hasta meaning hand is all about skill, being skillful in something and being very precise with Ketu. So I would say a better expression of this would be to be very skillful in dealing with other people. And again, because of everything I mentioned, is going to be really important in February, to be really a lot more skillful in dealing with your partner, for example, but any other, and not neglect that, and to really look after that place. And as you do that, then you'll be able to do what this Rahu character is asking of you now as well, which is play very many different roles and don very many different masks in order for you to play these different roles. And Rahu in the first house can be exciting, it can be unnerving, it can be everything. It can be, a lot going on, and a kind of overwhelm, and the sense of like, going through so much personal transformation that, it's hard to, in a way, when you're going through so much change that you're not very clear about, especially not be triggered by other people. It's like when you've got so much on your plate and then somebody comes in at just that time that it's just ill-timed, and you feel like, okay, and then you might kind of just take it out on them. So I would say just to be mindful of that, and to just work with people more skillfully as you go through your own changes in a more skillful, more discerning way, to be more clear about yourself is to be just more in tune with yourself and your needs. And and to be in tune with others, of course, as well, without overdoing that impulse. Because Pisces, of course, you're known for, and it's part of your nature to be just all inclusive. But of course, in this case, Rahu is in a way asking you to sort of maybe rethink that strategy for a while at least. Rahu is the 12th lord in your sign, is for the long haul for this year and into the first half of next year, 2025. It's really asking you to kind of just look at yourself differently and to maybe try different roles on and to maybe see which ones don't fit and get rid of them if the one that you're currently playing is just not you. It's not really you anymore, you know? And so all of these changes that are happening personally, of course, are going to impact you in many different ways. But as you can see, there's a lot of kind of things coming to a head in February, and there's a lot of triggers, but there's a lot of strength as well, and including the Mars, which is exalted in your 11th sign, and to really kind of go for your goals and ambitions, to really attack it head on, and to say what you want, and to be clear about what you want, to know what you're about. And then Saturn so powerfully, ruling all of these planets in your 12th sign, to be very clear about what you need to finish now and to begin that process of ending that, whatever it is, project you've been working on, or ending that thing that isn't, meant for you, or whatever it is, ending that relationship perhaps that's not healthy anymore and you need to kind of get onto a healthier, kick in February. These are things that might be expressed by Saturn and Mars. And both Saturn and Mars aspecting your ruler Jupiter in your second sign. So I would say one thing, just to leave it on this note, is that maybe just practically this is about getting on a healthy eating kick, a new healthy eating routine, because of all this impact on your second sign and your ruler Jupiter. So I hope that's a bit of help, Pisces. I wish you all the best for the month of February, and until next time.